Hi, we're here for step 2 of data. And step 1 of data is your given data. It comes in a spreadsheet. It might have a certain amount of fields already added to it. You're looking for patterns within that data to sort of just begin to ask questions about how useful could this be to facilitate a design. Since designs are really made from data, I was going to show another way of getting data, which is to use the web itself. And I'm showing a popular site right now. I'm showing IMDb. Now, take this with a grain of salt because there is no perfect way to do this, but many do not realize that the actual world of the internet itself is completely jam-packed with all of these sort of repeatable structures, and what we can do with those is take them and use them for our own purposes. Now, this is to really take what's beneath the surface of a website and put it and repurpose it. So, for example, I'm not positive of the actual value of this, but here's IMDb's top 250 movies. Okay, it's a good enough start. Let's just start there and see how would you get this data to go and do something else with it. Well, I'm going to use a tool, even though I'm not necessarily recommending this tool, but just to let you know, there are several tools that just are called web scrapers. This one is called Simple Scraper. So in order to scrape a website, you start this process by adding fields. So it looks to me, and I think I can figure this out, field number 1 is here, and it looks to be, let's see, a image. So movie image, let's call it that. So image has 250 items. So far so good. It'll kind of give us a count of how many it finds on the page. We talked about 250 movies, so I think we're good to go. In this case, the second idea would be the name. Here, let's call it movie title. Even better. And there it is. And there are 250 of those. Not bad. Looks like there's another piece of data they kind of appended, so let's go get that too. In this case, let's see, that would be year. Probably that's year it came out, but I think we'll just be a little sloppy for demonstration purposes. It looks to me like this is another piece of data. Let's see if this works. This is going to be rank. Is it? Okay, it is not. So in this case, this is an interesting idea that they've actually just used the format of ordered list in HTML to create the numbers. We've got a IMDb rating, so let's do that instead. IMDb rating. Oops. And that's right there, and it looks like there's 250 of those. Great. And that's about it. Now, one thing we could, well, let's take a look. So first of all, we are missing the idea of an image. Let's not be super concerned about that because it's also picked up this link underneath it. So you've got actually the link to IMDb and the name of the movie. You've got the year with a little bit of formatting, and here's the image. Okay, so not quite sure about the timing there, but IMDb rating also I think I seem to have messed up. But no matter, I've only spent a few minute or two here. What's important, hopefully, is that you're seeing that, hey, out there in the world of every experience where you're going to see all this repetition of data and information, how I find that some of the time you might want to use it and do a better job than the data that you have seen, if that makes sense. Number 2 is a lot of services, for example, provide data. And that's where data can come from what is known as an API. And APIs are just really interfaces, almost like what you're seeing here, whereas I ask for something, and in this case I'm just saying, hey, go and repeat, put this in this box, etc. You just go ask it, and sometimes you can ask it and give it particular instructions, which is even better. Hey, I want the weather for my town, not all weather. So So APIs, scraping websites, getting stuff from this. By the way, I might want to show this really quick. Let's see. I'll do it in JSON. So if you're interested and have heard of JSON, JSON is JavaScript object notation, which really just is a database, but it's extremely repetitious for a lot of reasons. But you can kind of see easily here is that name value pair that may in a CSV file, where the one we started could be one row that indicates all of the heading columns. You know, it just kind of says, hey, I'm heading a column, and then it just gives you the data to preserve space. Here it's very verbose, and it'll just repeat itself over and over, but that makes it slightly easy to read. So the image is here, movie titles, etc. I just wanted to say one thing we didn't talk about with data is what can you put in it is fairly limited to text, images, dates. Yeah, you know, it's basically it, which is believe me, powerful enough. One great thing about information architecture is not to have too many choices. You're actually, in some ways, the simplification of the database structures are something that really helps you to not have to nitpick over too many minutia, although you can. But if you were wondering, hey, if I had a video, would the video be in a table in a database? Like it would just be this super long string of code of some sort that reconstitutes as a video? Normally, no, because A, it's too big and it's kind of unwieldy. You really don't want it there. What you tend to do is point to something. And in this case, the pointer you can read, which is kind of interesting that it's pointing to Amazon, which is a big host. They call these CDNs, or content delivery networks. I could get that wrong, but anyway, either way, just places you put stuff. And those in themselves are big databases and tons of files that keep track of each other. But if I wanted to see this image, you know, you can go and pull the images. But for the most part, this belongs to Amazon. I'd say there's some difficulties because they could change this around if they wanted to. This is sort of inside baseball of like, where do you keep stuff? So that you can't go directly from a scrape and say, hey, I'm going to pull audio files, for example, or something like that. You know, the files themselves might be under a little bit of obscurity, but I'll bet you, and let's just see if I can win this bet, that it'll show me the extremely tiny Shawshank Redemption thumbnail. Neat. But you then have to go download that image itself, which is called, by the way, this huge long bunch of junk with maybe some instructions, because sometimes you actually want to deliver different resolutions of the same image or something like that. That's why they call it a thumbnail. So those might actually be instructions that this is 45 pixels by 67 pixels. Occasionally you can play with those numbers and see what it'll return, just as a fun thing to do. But many times imagery is going to play a huge role in design, so it's nice to know kind of what the mechanics are behind where those images are and how to get them. So hopefully that was interesting and or helpful, that not only can you just be given data as a precursor to design and ask for it, you can also go find data if you need to, or look at a particular site and look at how their data is structured. The one thing I dislike about this, obviously it's not as powerful as an API, which is actually going to be documented and give you probably a lot more in terms of robustness about the data that it's going to return to you. Or if you're building an API internally, this is where a designer I think could play a huge role in understanding different use cases, such as this ranking, for example. I would say in the next video, I just want to go into the infinite properties of databases. And the reason why I find that fascinating is that if you have a good enough data model, you could have 10 records in it, or you could have 10 million records in it. 10 million or better. They do come with different problems we can discuss, but it just is the scalability of your data model that really makes it powerful, but also means that you might spend more time in thinking of use cases and things about, well, what would I want to actually put in this very limited, I think I did prove this is a fairly limited data table. It barely describes a movie if you think about it. It doesn't have director, running time, rating. Anyway, there's so many fields that I would add to this, which also leads us to a database can have this view, or in this particular case, it could have the detailed view, which thank you Verizon. But in this case, IMDb's pretty great data model leads you to find all sorts of other things that you might want to bring along, such as actors are a good thing, great thing actually, writers, cast and crew. So goes on and on and on with the amount of connected data that could all should be in your table. It's just you do not have to show it at every view. So one view can look one way, one view can look another. So that's the real power of starting with a database rather than a design, because designs tend to be a little more rigid about how they look because they're designs, but they don't often reflect, well, what do you need in the background to facilitate or to change that view depending on the person using it and their goals and ideas. So just to give you an example, we talked a little bit about APIs, and there are API marketplaces out there. That might be just an easier way to go look around at the different kinds of opportunities and connections that you can make with different kinds of value propositions. So here's one, for example, that looks pretty typical because they're going to offer services such as you send a phone number and they're going to say something like it's a real phone number. A lot to do with weather, numbers, stocks, anything that really kind of has that dynamic aspect to it is a great service to provide to others, just because that just takes the load off of you having to work hard to get reliable data and build it on your own. Most companies, SaaS companies, are going to, and social media companies are going to have some sort of API so that people can integrate the data from their service into their service. And I've had some experience in that. It's not as important to a designer, except it really is good to know, just like we're here, what data do you have to work with? So you saw how you could go and get data and begin a data structure with some examples. This is number 2, a little bit more complicated connecting to an API, but hopefully from what we just saw, not that hard to understand. For example, I'm just going to show the YouTube API, which is going to talk here about the different kind of data that you normally get in asking for a video, and you're going to be able to ask and receive. What's nice here is that you're going to get a really fairly good idea of the kind of information that it'll provide. And this is sometimes not seen. It's just used to build the interface or to build different kinds of interaction. And I think you can see as a designer how a lot of this might be not only valuable, but something you could bring if you're trying to build out your database. What might you need in order to facilitate different sorts of views or certain experiences that you might want to build on top of it? So while again a lot of this might feel a little bit daunting, it might not actually be as bad as you think, because it is going to be readable, and a lot of this is really just language. And what does the language mean and do? Some of it is a little bit like yeah, a little behind the scenes. Now, I would do a demo here, but remember, you can usually just go straight to YouTube and ask for access to their API. Normally, there's really not much charge involved until you scale to an extent where you're going to use a lot of their bandwidth. So that being said, it's really easy to get started, really easy to prop something up, fairly easy to go and plug some of these data pieces, as we'll learn later, into different experiences and ideas and designs. So it is a really quick way of moving. However, there is a somewhat easier way to do it, which I like, which is called Airtable. So Airtable is an amazing product. And the design ideas behind it, I think, are just so powerful because it takes something pretty familiar, which is spreadsheets and tables, but it actually is creating databases, and really sophisticated databases at that. So let me show you just a quick example. And the one thing you can see right off the bat is that they're using a lot of design ideas, such as color coding things like when things are similar in a table, it's highlighting them. And it not only highlights them, it color codes them. And that allows you quickly to do all those kind of things like sorting and filtering in a fairly easy way. You're also able to add things and change the data types fairly quickly and easily. And some of the data types that it's extended itself to are things like multiple selections like there, or single selections like this. We were just talking about movies, so here's a great example where you've got at least one representative for the one of the actors, the main actor perhaps, or actor in the film, and then the director, and then some other data concerning it. Description is also a great one. So these are just ways that you can quickly not only get your data in here, but then Airtable is going to help you to try and sort and filter and make something out of it. So if we go to the marketplace or the universe, I think that's it. These are marketplaces extensions. The universe is where people share different data models. So I think I found a kind of a good example here, even though this particular topic isn't exactly of interest. The overall topic is a book, which is really interesting. It's a very vast amount of data, and I think this is a great data model for books. So let me just show you why. In this case, this is just different views that people have created using Airtable. Actually, that's one of its superpowers. In fact, most of the work of design you can really instantly jumpstart here in Airtable to see and experiment whether or not the data, you have enough data and an interesting set of data to be able to use or sort. Some of the views here are also available to configure how you like. What I am interested though is just the data structure itself. So if I go over here and I go to just this books all, this is great. So right now there's a instruction up here just says to hide some fields. So you can see here all the fields that they found about that relate to books. Some of these may or may not be important, but some look fairly interesting, such as maybe length is a good interesting thing. But let's just actually look at it. So right now you can see here's the title is very important. There's author, creator, year, so on and so forth. And let's just actually hide. So let's show all the fields. Now you're actually beginning to see what's going to take us to the next level, which is how do we start to group and organize. So we've got display tags. Now this is kind of where it seems like nothing, but we just said earlier you don't get to put images into a table or a spreadsheet, but what Airtable does is it just sort of sneaks it in here for you. It does the same thing we just talked to. It puts it somewhere, but it displays it just so you can see an image or images, which is exactly the way a database works and not a spreadsheet. So this is one thing I just think they did a great job at. I know this is well, it's not too bad. It's a tiny little thing. There's some stuff about education, etc. But the whole reason why, with a little bit of looking around and maybe a bit of puzzling through, you can find this table, this data model, and examples that begin to let you design and take the next step of how to organize this. And then we're going to get into how do you create value out of it. So we're still at data, but that's why, since there's so much of it, let's let the tools do the hard work for us. And Airtable, I think, and their not only their marketplace, but their ability to share with others really makes them the place where I would start.